Okay. Thank you, Sean. That was very nice. I know it's a little bit long-winded on some of those intros. Again, thanks for showing up, everyone. This is a filler presentation. So what that means is when we run out of, or somebody drops out of our presentation, this is one of those last minute, put it in because it's ordered. And I actually did part of this presentation in 2006 at the MIHA conference, and I think it was Bay City when we were up there. So some of the folks may have seen this. And then the second portion was the military, the 46th Military Police Command. As Sean mentioned, in 2010 and 11, I was deployed there. And that presentation was actually done at a contractor, a wastewater contractor, of all things, in 2012. So some of this might be, it's a lot of pictures. There's only a handful of slides that you got to read, and I'll try to point out the highlights. So there it is up there. Let's see, is this going to work? Oop. Well, because I'm going the wrong direction, okay. That is the 1171st Medical Company. This is a company that went to Iraq. We were primarily from Detroit, most of us, but we had people from all over the country. The Army Reserves backfilled some of our positions, but all in all, we were about an 80-man and woman unit, okay. That deployment, we were gone for basically almost 12 months in country in Iraq. We were about 2 weeks, 10 days shy of making a year. We call it boots on ground. Typically, your Army Reserves, and primarily the National Guard, they're not, if you have to go on a deployment longer than 12 months, you have to have a higher approval through the federal system to keep National Guard units on duty longer than 12 months. So most of the deployments today, you try to get the units in and out within that 12-month window, to include going to a pre-MOB site. We spent 3 months at a pre-MOB site, which was in Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. So all in all, we were on duty in uniform. Again, this is a typical reserve or Army Guard unit for about 15 months. Basically, the unit, as a medical company or a medical area support company, which they're called now, they've been called many things, medical clearing units, like the old MASH TV show, that was actually one of the frontline type medical units, and they had a different name, but again, they were all similar units. This particular, we had a headquarters platoon, which took care of our logistics, our admin, and our maintenance needs, and we had a treatment platoon, which is where the doctors, the PAs, the medics, and all the other ancillary X-ray lab, those guys were in that platoon. Then we had an ambulance platoon. The ambulance platoon did exactly transportation within the FOB. So now I'm going to have several, went the wrong way, several slides denoting that I am, me and the first sergeant, that's my first sergeant, and that's me next to us. So we were both, we were the 24/7 guys. This is a busy slide, apologize, but basically, 1171st provides area general support, medical support throughout the theater or throughout, in this case, Victory Base, service support area, and that's kind of anywhere in any area. We had to be prepared to move out and wherever they needed the medical assistance deployed or our medics, that's basically what our mission was. And that's a lot of wording there, but like I said, we'll go by. I was, again, the company commander for this unit, so I was all over 3 primary clinics that we had in Iraq. This is Baghdad. Basically, the Baghdad Air Force Base, or Baghdad International Airport, we call it BIOP, is either here, and then the embassy was over here. So we had 2 of our primary missions for medical support in that area. Then we had a place out, we call this the Eastern, this was Fallujah. TQ is what we called it for short, but we also had another small clinic, about a dozen soldiers, PAs, and doctors in that clinic. And then, as I said, as we go on, I'm going to show you what we got here. That's our primary operation area. Uh-oh, what did I do? Oh, there we go. That's the GOLBY Troop Clinic. That's where we worked out of. And I got another slide that's going to show, there was actually, we were the Baghdad International Airport encompasses about 12 square miles. So there's 3 other medical units there. We had a hospital. We also had a prison camp where we would take some of our patients who were bad guys, and we would leave them at the hospital till they were well enough to ship them to some other detaining center. And I'll show you a couple, there'll be photos of that. Yeah, that's the next slide. So basically our unit provided care to, 24,000 patients. And this is our nearly 12 months in country that took place. And then PHDH, basically it's a system where you review every soldier's medical files. You give them a physical before they return home to make sure they're fit, make sure there's not any illnesses. So that's PDHA. That was a system of reviewing medical records and making sure shots were completed. And we did nearly 11,000. We provided over 9,000 immunizations. A lot of folks were coming from the United States or different places, and they would start a series of shots, let's say, and then they would sometimes have to finish up in our clinic. So all that was tracked. And then we filled 17,000 plus prescription. Again, our unit supported all the ancillary things like pharmacy, x-ray, labs, and a few other specialty type skill sets. And we evacuated. That's a big one right there. We provided evacuation in our little, again, we were one of 3 area support medical companies that did this mission, but that was probably where we were probably the busiest because we always were shipping somebody out. That's what it looks like. That's the Baghdad International Airport. My unit was somewhere down in this area. We had units that were, the reason this is such a big area, besides the Air Force could land in and out of there safely, and again, it was in the heart of Baghdad. When we had people attack our base, and it went all the way, you can see, this is the outer perimeter, okay? And I mean, you could take, hostile or enemy fire from any corner of the base because you're right in the city. And we did, you're gonna see some photos there. Again, I said it's roughly 12 square miles. There's a detainee hospital. That's where the prisoners would go that were injured or ill. And then there's multiple evac sites there, meaning that we had multiple places to fly patients out of. This is what the company area looked like. You can see any glass, let me back up. This place that we were in, the GOLBY clinic, was part of Saddam Hussein's zoo area. When I got there, they call it a mature theater, meaning that the fighters already cleared out the area, and we started establishing a FOB, a forward observation base, where normal life for that theater could be completed. So it was secured. You'll see a lot of us not walking around in armor gear, but the GOLBY clinic was the zoo area, like clinic for the animals, veterinary. So when they took this area in the beginning of the war, there was a elephant, or they had all kinds of zoo, tigers, monkeys, all kinds of stuff running around in this area when the soldiers were moving in. Again, this was an area where Saddam Hussein had a zoo. He had a playground. They called it Jellystone. It was, mimicked right after the Flintstones, houses that look like that for his grandkids. Lots of ponds, lots of building, and there's a palace here. And you're going to see a couple pictures of that. That's where our higher headquarters was. But this is our ambulance parking area. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. These are in the FOB. They're not heavy armored. This is our maintenance tent. Just about everybody had a little air conditioning in their areas, but the poor maintenance guys did not. They were out in that hot sun or cold weather 24/7. So we got the clinic layout. Basically, this is what I was talking about, the different treatments we had. X-ray and lab right here, pharmacy right there. These were our treatment areas where we could do surgery, or we could just do simple a physical, multiple levels of medical treatment. And that's what these area support companies are. They're the new modern way that the military supports the battlefront. You can implement them with different units. We actually had a behavioral science, a mental health section attached to our unit, but you can get even specialized. Rehab didn't typically take place. Basically, the mission of a medical unit in a combat theater is to get you're either going to get your soldiers or your troops better in 72 hours. That's the intent. You keep them only for 72 hours. We had a patient holding, and the idea is to get them back in the war fight as quickly as you can. If they needed more medical services, we shipped them up to the next level of the treatment, which would be hospitals. Over here, we did have a hospital in Baghdad, but we usually sent our soldiers if they needed higher treatment, to Germany. That's where they all, and there's a couple slides in there that I'll be able to show you there. Treatment platoon, that's the one I was talking, this is where probably our highest skilled soldiers, you know, our doctors. This is there's some of the injuries, but I want to go back. This was a Vietnam era special force soldier who became a doctor. He was probably 65 years old, and he was one of our, he stayed, he came back, he was actually retired, he came back into the military so he could treat. You get a lot of different war veterans that feel very obligated or feel compelled to still serve well beyond their, you know, youthful age. And then these are treatments in our facility. You can see we have beds there as well. This is our patient holding I was talking about, 72 hours that we would hold them. And this is actually training. This is not actually an injury, but with this, they have moulage kits. A moulage kit is something that if you had, it would be a fake wound, open chest wound, bleeding arms, different things like that. And that was one of our training days. If we weren't working on real life patients, we were constantly training our medical people to maintain their skills. And there's these are some of the true life injuries we've seen. As a bullet wound to the leg, there's a part of a shrapnel. This guy, unfortunately, was in downrange from either a rocket or a mortar. Another injury, this is a wound from a bullet. And then we got extra. Now, we took care of soldiers and we took care of the enemy as well. And some of them might be our medics missions, okay? So we got the FOB, or the Area Support Medical Mission. That's one aspect. We also sent medics out, we call it outside the wire or outside of the FOB walls. The medics mission was they were on patrol with the units that were pulling patrol, but they would assist if somebody got hit or injured. That was their job, to help fix whoever was injured, or, you know, get them treated so we can get them back to higher. This is what the full battle gear looked like. This is one of our medics posing with one of he's actually a Iranian police, not Iranian, but Iraqi police. Same thing here. This is outside. These are called T-walls. They're outside. You can see the police vehicle back here. These are, again, Iraqi police officers, and these are our soldiers. That's the back of a convoy right here in this picture. But this is kind of the downtown area. And you'll see, you can see how kind of cluttered it is, and you can have a bad guy anywhere. You could have an IED, which we'll talk about anywhere, like these tires. That would be suspect. You know, if you drive, especially when the patrols would go out, usually you sent the same soldiers so they would recognize if anything was out of place. So, key things. This was one, we got there in 2006, September. I fell on it, and then the unit we were replacing was actually a Illinois National Guard unit. The commander from that unit was a friend of mine, actually, when I became an officer, my basic officer training, Jeff Williams. And we took the mission from him, and that's kind of, you hand off, the next unit takes the mission from the next unit replacing him. Unfortunately for him, he did lose a medic over there, and this medic was shot twice. So usually when you get shot once, you're allowed to go home. But they were close to the end of the mission, so he wanted to stay. The first time he got shot, I think he got nicked somewhere in the shoulder or by the neck, but it wasn't a fatal or any serious wound, but it was enough. You know, you get shot, that's usually enough for everybody out. The next time he was out on patrol with or the medic on patrol, he got shot, and you got body armor that will try to cover the back of your head with a flab, and they anticipated the Iranian special forces were in there because they had the ballistic weapon or bullets to pierce our body armor, as well as they were sharpshooters. That's a dead zone. You have to be a really good shot to hit somebody right there in the neck and the spine. One of the things we could tell, though, our soldiers would be out there smoking, and their body armors would cover everything of the vital areas of your body, but your armpit, when you lift your arm up to smoke, you allowed yourself to be open. And we had several soldiers shot right at the armpit level with ballistic bullets. So we knew this is not what the average bad guy over there carried. You knew these were the special forces that were over there. But Saddam was our number. When we got there, he was actually being held, and I'll show you, there's a little bombed out house in that FOB area that they kept him in the basement. The United States was responsible for once we captured him, we were responsible taking care of him and keeping him healthy, right up to the point they executed him. And he came into our clinic because I had a doctor and 2 medics assigned to him 24/7. He had medical attention. I mean, I can go down, he was a very intelligent man, could speak multiple languages, and most of the medics that worked with him said he was like any older grandpa type guy, you know, very friendly, very intelligent, but when he got in front of the cameras, infidels, he'd raise a lot of cane about how bad we were, you know, playing for the cameras. 2 weeks before, they hung him in December of 2006. He came into our clinic, I think it was around December 1st of that month. We cleaned his teeth. My higher command, the brigade level, we had a 2-star general who was a dentist from Georgia, but he commanded all the medical assets in Iraq. And then I had a dentist from Lapeer, Paul Smoody. He was deployed with me for about 4 months. Our dentists and our doctors were on like a 4-month cycle. The rest of the soldiers, we were all there for whatever the duration of the deployment was. But usually our medical professionals, because they had so much to lose as far as if they were gone too long, we learned lessons from Desert Storm. A lot of the doctors or people in those roles that had businesses, their businesses suffered when they left on deployment. So by the time we got, spin up 10, 20 years later, now that the Army, with the reservists and with the Guard, put these guys on only a 4-month commitment so they don't lose their businesses. So they will still have the volunteers to serve when they have those type of conditions. Dentists, the doctors, there might have been 1 or 2 other professionals that we did. But anyhow, we cleaned his teeth 2 weeks before they hung him. So he had nice clean teeth for that. And they don't mess around over there. He was there 2 weeks in trial, found guilty, off to the gallows they took him. This is the ambulance platoon, or this is a 3rd platoon. I'm not going to, I've got other slides, but basically, let's go back. These guys this is demonstrating how we load patients and basically bringing them to the evac, to the helicopters, another evac scene. This is what my soldiers were doing, the ambulance platoon. This is their primary mission. These 2 soldiers, this is a supply sergeant, and this is our admin sergeant. Those guys are kind of busy 24/7 because they were the only specialists in their field, even though we had trained up backup people to help so they could have time off. But for the most part, when you're in theater like that, your time clock is almost, it's 24/7, and you try to get relief when you can get it. Higher medical command, okay. So the Baghdad International, as Baghdad ER, actually, prior to me going to Iraq, I remember seeing the ER series that are on TV. They actually did Baghdad ER. And this is a higher, but most of these people are going to be the civilians. This is a baby. We had a lot of children. This is surgery taking place in this hospital outside of our FOB, into the city of Baghdad. Some more, pictures of treatment. So we're going to move right along because I got a lot. Environmental health. This is kind of what I want to bring home. We had also environmental health. I was an environmental health science officer. Now, it's environmental science. We don't even put the health in there, but it's the responsibilities are all part of everything under hazardous waste to medical. But we had vector control. That's mosquito traps. We had testing the water, and then this is air quality monitoring. We had a water plant that was built. The next 9 slides, and I'm going to kind of move through those quickly so I can get to the halfway point, but they made, as the frame says, over 10 million bottles a day. Okay, we had our own treatment plant. The water, this is a tributary to the Tigris River. This is where the water came out. You can see it coming out of here. These are some bulk storage, and those storage units were used for firefighters, flushing toilets, things of that nature. So we definitely had potable, non-potable. Environmental sections were responsible. Another shot of the river where the water came from. This was a multi-million-dollar plant because we left it there for the Iraqis after the United States left. But they made the bottles. There's the resins for the bottles. There's the machinery to get those bottles going, the plant process. There's basically a super humongous reverse osmosis. These are all the filters right here that water from the stream is coming from. More processing. These guys were the primary plant operators, so they were responsible for producing in safe water for that area, really for the FOB. That was our main plant. And they even built the pallets right there in the FOB. Everything was done right inside the FOB. The FOB, if I didn't mention, is a forward observation base, okay? So life was all sustained. And this is the water trucks that were hauling things around. I mean, you can see potable water. I think it says right here. You can see this is the back where you've seen all those bottles. This is a storage area for that, where the trucks came and picked them up. And these are some basic water storage. We call those bladders. Then you would have, those are things that you can deflate or collapse quickly, move on the road and set up for the next. Had a lot of storage units, containers like that, and you see more. Usually the pallets of bottled water would be set wherever the soldiers were, so they could have easy access to it. And we even had septic trucks pumping out. We had porta pots all over the place. We had some good units, but you can see, just like here, they're pumping out, you know, those porta pots. The bathrooms, multiple bathrooms. Again, this is Iraq, so these are bath houses, like trailers, and they have, you know, multiple commodes, showers, everything we needed. These are bathrooms in the palace. This is one of Saddam's palaces where they hire headquarters. They had gold handles on the fixtures. In some cases, a lot of that stuff was either taken, you know, when the beginning of the war, that didn't last very long. And this is the kind of trough, urinal trough, or in some case, we would have big holes in the floor for just squatting over and letting her loose. So they were pretty, and this was in a high-end, you know, building, palace. This was a palace, so that's the kind of restroom. These are the more modern units, okay? You see how small they are. They're easy. You can put them on the back of a truck, throw them in a helicopter, land them in places. This is what they tip. They were tight, but you know what? There's the comforts of home. Everybody, when you know, you much rather use one of these versus those porta pots. So they were popular items. Wastewater tanks, they're above ground, of course, black water labeled. Those are throughout. Air quality, everywhere over there, this is the scene, okay? Something was being blown up, something was on fire, you could have burn pits. You can see that's a vehicle just outside of the FOB burning up. This is a rocket that landed. You can see the vehicle here. It's it looks like one of our trucks. It's got the medical symbol in there. And then in the distance, the burn pits, you know, that's what that stuff looks like. Traveling in Iraq, okay, C-130s were the primary because you get them up high and they would miss any kind of enemy fire. This is me sitting getting ready to go, but this is how you battled up. Of course, there's a little toilet in that C-130 I thought I had, as a sanitarian, had to point out, especially in the wastewater world. Was it something, and same thing, we traveled in helicopters. Gunners were always there with the machine guns, so that was all part of the flight crew. You got in, you strapped up, and again, you're all battle rattled is what they used to say, but you got all your body armor on. Traveling inside, right, on the ground. This is, because we could go from the Baghdad International Airport into the embassy where our politicians were, and we traveled. This is an armored vehicle, okay? It's all loaded with, you know, bullets don't generally penetrate that. We called these buffaloes. It looks like a motorhome. That's one of the bullets that got shot. This is a PA and myself, and he's pointing out the bullet when we went to the embassy we got shot at. But that was very common. This is when they left our FOB. These are just pictures of, this is a hospital over, the Air Force ran most of the hospital, some of the other next level hospital. It was mostly Air Force people, and this is them unloading a patient, getting ready to, Heroes Highway. You know, they would put a lot of different things to motivate those poor soldiers that were wounded coming through that. Patient decon, I'm gonna go through this quickly. We constantly trained every month on patient decon. The big fear was that Saddam had a big storage of chemical weapons, biological, so the military tried to train for that. So that's what you're seeing, training, a lot of water washing, decontaminating a patient with their mask on, all these different things. These were mobile decontamination units. There's like just a round tent. This is where we could slide. Basically, you call it a hot zone, dirty zone, or we would put a patient through here, that's going through here once we decontaminated, then we wanted to get them into the unit to treat them, but we wanted them clean. So we decontaminated them outside the treatment unit, and then from there, they would sustain them and get them into the clinic if necessary. Now, luckily, we didn't have any chemical warfare, so we didn't have to utilize that, but we trained very heavily in that. So you can see even more pictures. The soldiers are not battled up, but they're training constantly for that threat. IEDs, explosive devices. This is one of the medics that was out. He was on this side. He actually did the smiley face, which didn't upset me, but it did upset the higher commander. But he got direct hit in his armored vehicle. You can see the type of, weapons, rockets. This was, if people got hit in the FOB, it was just a bad day for you, because most of the rockets and mortars were just kind of bad luck if you were in the down range. What they would do on the outside perimeters, they would take tubes, a mortar tube, and the mortar tube is like a 4 or 5, about 3 inch, and they would drop a rocket. They would freeze the rocket in the mortar tube or the mortar, set it out at night, so when the sun came up during the day, it would melt, and the mortar would slide down, off it went into the FOB. And then rockets, but this is right down in our living area, okay? It took out this T-wall, that's how much of an explosion it is. Took out this living trailer, and it wasn't our unit. This is a bullet that I pulled out from above my head, because where our clinic was, unfortunately, was downrange from a watchtower. So during the day or night, bad guys would come and shoot at the guys in the tower, and the bullets would come downrange in our AO, our medical unit area. And when you hear this stuff, at first it takes a minute, because you hear whiz, and you hear tree branches broken, but that was probably about 3 or 4 feet above my head into our clinic wall. And then same thing, guys just unfortunate, their vehicles would get hit by a rocket or a mortar. A lot of hazardous weather condition. We had a lot of flooding. Basically, an environmental science officer, if you were assigned to do that mission there, you're looking at these hazards. You're looking at the seasonal flooding. You're looking at, hey, here's a truck, can we move it through that terrain when it's wet? But you can see we had a lot of flooding. All our areas flooded out. And again, these are T-walls. That's what protected us. From the sky, again, this is that area of Baghdad. Saddam was kept in this blown out building in the basement. And there was only one path, very heavily secured. The embassy palace, having right here, it's gigantic. It looks like a commercial building from the air, but this is where we were. My clinic was somewhere in this mess, but I'm going to keep going because I know we're running out of time. From the air, this is a typical housing of most of the Iraqi population. Not many of them had money, so they're very mud huts and very poor areas. It's hard to sell out, but that's all trash. And this is all sewage that you can see from the air as you're flying in these homes. Some of the equipment to fight, these are vehicles that went out. They're all armored up. These would go out and try to find those IEDs. Same thing, this is a piece of equipment that would either go in front of the vehicle pushing it to try to hit anything so it would blow that up versus, lives. Keeping cool. These are throughout, primarily this point here is where we flew in and out. People who went on vacations or who were coming in the company, they sat at the flight area, and you could sit there for 3 or 4 days. One thing about travel in these countries, if the weather's bad or if they're taking enemy fire, you don't fly, and if you're stuck over in one of the bases and where you're not at home or your home base, you'd be there for several days. Okay, the military, and I am going through this somewhat fast. I've been told I can tell war stories all day if you're sitting at the bar with me or anywhere, really. Talk about this stuff. Where we're at, okay. So basically, the 46 MP Command, we were responsible primarily for taking care of detainees, prisoners, in Bagram Air Force Base. And we took care of them medically. We also interrogated them there. We had CIAs and different special forces guys that did that. I was telling Sean the other night, was it Old Dark 30 or Zero, the one where they shoot Bin Laden? Zero Dark 30. Thank you. In the beginning of that movie, they're waterboarding a guy. That prison, where that took place, was actually in this Bagram Air Force Base. I was actually in that building. Now that had happened early on in the Afghan war. And by the time I got over there, the theater was mature. We already had, and you're going to see some detention centers. Basically, Bagram Air Force Base is right here, and this is Kabul, the capital. This is where the higher command is. There's so much history to go through that I'm not with this Bagram, and even you'll hear the critics talk about how we gave up that air base. That air base was very secured because This is it right here from the air. You had all this visual area. If somebody's going to sneak up on you, you're going to see them. And they got the mountaintops there. So this was a very, because we were holding detainees, this is the new prisons or the detentions. This is where we lived. These tents are pretty much what we were in. Then eventually we got some modern housing units. But this area was all mined because the Russians were there in the 70s. So they actually built the airstrip. And then we show up in the 2000s. There were still mines all the way from the Russians all around this base. So we had some of the foreign governments did the work, typically a 12-hour day every day. So we would split up our people. So we'd have, 50% on, 50% off. You had to be very flexible. I mean, and that can be tough in a stressful situation when you're in a combat zone. I talked about 3 or 4 days of travel because of area, close, enemy, if you were locked down because of the weather, we had a windstorm, and even the winters are really harsh there. You'll see a couple pictures here. Yeah, and I can explain. This is me. These are 6 other soldiers. I actually served with her in Desert Storm, but all 7 of us, we all either served in Desert Storm, well, all 3 of us served in Desert Storm, Iraq, and then now Afghanistan. So that's why we took, this is our base camp. Well, so but Harris is one of our soldiers we lost, but so we just, one day, because we were all 3 war veterans, we took that picture and we made hats. We got some special hats that were made for us. But this is what the living huts were in the beginning. There's the T-walls, the security forces. Most of these guys are all civilian contractors. Heidelberg, I think, was the one doing our, taking care of us at that time. These guys would sign up for at least 18-month contracts, and they might fly home once, but depending if you were in the kitchen staff or the mess hall staff, your pay obviously wasn't as high as somebody who's an engineer taking care of the wastewater or the water plants. Okay. And this is what, by the time I left Afghanistan, this is what came in, these mobile units, okay? Some of these are bathrooms. This is what the Quonset hut type style is what we went into, very, very primitive, bunks, multiple bunks. Our rooms were real tight, but these are actually, and you've seen they're the shipping crates, or that's what these housing, mobile houses, 2-story, multiple trailer, and they built them to be housing units. Now that's something that's even popular here in the States. You'll see people going with that type of housing. And these are some shots from the sky. This is troops walking through. These are all, some of it are Russian military. Again, Russia was in Afghanistan for a long time. I don't know if it was 10, but from the 70s up till they got chased out by the Northern Alliance in the late 79, 78. These are the trails. This is actually from Pakistan. Most of our equipment, if you couldn't fly it into the base because it was too heavy or it wasn't a priority, it went through these trails through Afghanistan where there was multiple warlords, different hazards all through the trail. The trail would freeze up. So if you had something coming, it might be sitting right out. And what happened, once they freeze up, the warlords control these areas. Sometimes your stuff got there. Sometimes it was traveling on the back of a Afghani's pull cart. And this is kind of the train. This is where a lot of the warlord types areas are. Very primitive, very rough to travel. Ain and Force, that was the other half of our mission when we were in Afghanistan, the Afghani National Army. We trained them, okay, and this is what you're seeing. This is part of the detention. These are the towers around the detention center. But we were training these folks to take this detention center over. And many of them, some of them for combat, but the majority of the Afghan soldiers cannot read or write. So the sergeants that could have a little bit, and the officers could have a little bit of education, they became the leaders. But the intent is when we left, these guys would take over the mission and secure the area, and you can see how long that lasts. It didn't last very long once we did pull out. But that was a big mission for us. This is building more detention centers. This is kind of what it looked like inside there. We had different, just like here in the prison system, we have different levels of detention. Bad guys got solitary, other guys. A lot of our prisoners were not necessarily terrorists or bad guys. They might have been young people that got picked up for shoplifting or trying to steal something. So there was a lot of you can't really rehabilitate too many of the terrorists, the real hardcore guys. You try to interrogate them to get information. But some of these guys, we offered voc tech training, gardening, beekeeping, sewing, cooking. We wanted to give them skill sets that they could go back into the community and be successful at trying to make a living versus getting dragged into the terrorist group and made, to fight. But yeah, that's basically what it looks like. The detention center, the Afghan people, great people, majority of them. You can see that they practice all the traditional Muslims way. Young boy working in like a foundry. I mean, that's kind of environment they were up to. Fires, I mean, again, you just look out your window, fires everywhere. This is actually a plane crash up here in the mountains, one of the cargo planes that didn't make it up there. I don't know if it was shot down. And this is us and the Afghan soldiers trying to go up to it, but you can see, like I said, explosions everywhere, fires everywhere, common. Environment was harsh, same thing. If you're an environmental science officer assigned to go up, you usually will go in front of the war fighters to see what kind of environmental elements you got to deal with. What kind of, you get, because it's so high in mountain and elevation, you had to be in good shape. This guy, he's climbing up a mountain and he's winded. The type of dust storms he would have, sleeping out in the environment, they're sleeping on the mountaintops, and you can see even our own helicopters throwing just all kinds of different hazardous. This is in the FOB. Okay, these are some of our smaller planes they got shot at. You can see, I mean, they took real live fire. One thing about the soldiers, we really had to get on them about not taking food back to the tent or back to their sleeping quarters. If you took food back there, besides bringing critters like flies and other things that would contaminate other stuff, it attracted mice. Well, the mice attracts these cobras. And this is one of the first sergeants from one of our unit. They pulled this cobra out of one of the sleeping tents, and that's what he's showing everybody. But same thing we had, this is a guy acting like he's caught on a